Humans weren't meant to outscore galactic warlords on their entrance. Trials. 12 worlds assembled at the Dominion's drifting citadel. Each realm sent their strongest candidates to face the Overseer's ultimate challenge. For ages it had been the defining standard, the trial that crowned the true heirs of cosmic power. No human had ever stood before the Overseers until this day. Her name was Carrera Dent, captain who had endured asteroid traps, frozen outposts and collapsing colonies. The Overseers gave her a final warning as she stepped into the circle of light. Human, this ordeal is not for. Leave now and preserve what little remains of your species. She smirked, rolling her shoulders back, her armor scarred and patched from countless pains. Guess I've always liked the impossible. The first trial ignited around her. Entire continents unfolded in illusion. Visions of alien warfronts that had shattered armies. Fleets clashed across Earth. Strongholds sank into oceans of fire, starship wrecks drifting in silence. The Overseers demanded she pick a battlefield, step into it and prove herself. She didn't pause. She pointed to the mightiest, the Dominion core siege, where 12 factions had failed to crack a single wall. Put me there, Kara said. I'll show you how humans handle sieges. Her body dissolved into light and reformed at the base of a dark fortress that vanished into clouds of alien champions had charged here. 4 decades destroyed by cannons that never rested. Kara walked forward alone. Above her, turrets scanned movement. Bolts of plasma rained down. She dashed, ducking low, her visor charting every trajectory. Instead of rushing the gates, like all before her, she focused on the ground. Deep scars marked where conduits fed power into the wall. Aliens always thought massive. They hurled legions at fortresses. Kara thought simple. Drew a spanner from her belt and drove it into the conduit. Sparks erupted. Turrets stuttered and spat. Overseers, watching in the citadel, leaned forward, mandibles twitching. A single human, undermining what countless armies could not touch, defied every prediction model. Alarms shrieked. More cannons unfolded, and mechanical guardians dropped down. Kara laughed, swinging a coil gun built from scrap. She didn't aim for bulk. Fired at joints, the spots no alien warrior bothered with. One after another collapsed, twitching in sparks. Kara hit another conduit, and fortress lights dimmed like a dying beast. The walls cracked open to unleash defenders clad in radiant armor, their blades sliced steel, their shields pulsed with energy that bent gunfire. Kara holstered her weapon. Instead she pulled out a beaten crowbar. Overseers murmured across the galaxy-wide net. Is this human insane? She faced plasma-born guardians with junk metal. Kara grinned, charging ahead. She hooked the crowbar behind a shield core and twisted with a mechanic's touch. The field shattered, exposing the soldier to his own allies. Last, she turned their power against them, every weapon becoming friendly fire. When the last fell, the fortress shook and bowed, its core revealed. Kara climbed the wreckage and planted her boot on the pulsing heart. She wasn't meant to triumph, yet she raised her hand like a worker clocking out. Back in the citadel, Overseers hissed. Warning had failed. One trial complete. Too many left, and the human was only getting started. The second challenge sparked alive before she could breathe. This time no fortress. It was a wormhole without end, a reenactment of the Dominion's proud conquest, the fall of the Hellion expanse. Armadas filled the void, alien dreadnoughts lining walls of steel and flame. The overseers thundered. No human fleet survived this. Do not throw yourself away. Carrera chuckled, smearing grime off her cheek. Fleet. Don't need one. She climbed into the cockpit of a rusted shuttle meant for test. Its thrusters sputtered, its targeting flickered with faults, but she strapped in anyway. Alarms screamed as Dominion guns locked on. Kara slammed her palm against the console. The shuttle lurched ahead. Instead of striking warships, she dove under formations, weaving between blasts so close they scorched her hull. Alien admirals scoffed until they realized she wasn't aiming for ships. She was tracing faint signals of command relays, fragile circuits hidden in armor. Her shuttle spat mines patched with explosives. One relay burst, then another. The fleet staggered, orders cut off, dreadnoughts smashing into each other in chaos. Overseers cried across channels, forcing simulations to recalc. Kara's shuttle danced through wreckage, shattering link after link until the once glorious wall of steel collapsed into drifting ruin. Alone in her broken craft, Kara leaned back and laughed. You warned me, overseers. Maybe you should have warned yourselves. The trials were meant to last until every contender failed. Kara was already rewriting what the galaxy believed possible. Overseers traded frantic signals. If the human reached the last trial, Dominion's rule might fracture. Yet Kara only dusted her gloves, ready for more. For her, this was never about dodging their warning. It was about proving that humans, with their strange craft and stubborn humor, were not just survivors but victors, waiting for their moment. The overseers assembled in the high chamber, bodies glowing with ancient authority, and for the first time in ages they argued. No champion had ever forced debate among outcomes were always certain, but the human shattered certainty. Kara stood on the dais, helmet tucked beneath her arm as the chamber bent and shifted into the third arena. She leaned forward with a grin, as though she'd been waiting for the next punchline. The overseers spoke as one, their layered voices echoing across realms. The third trial is choice, or wisdom. Fight, grow stronger, or solve what no mind has solved. Kara tilted her head. You really think those are different? The arena snapped into place. A boundless plain littered with wreckage of shattered ships, ancient engines, broken hulls half buried in vent. Overhead the sky glimmered with a lattice of equations, fractal maps stretching beyond sight. Starpath twisted into riddles that had crushed civilizations. The overseers declared, this is the maze of continuum. Armies perished trying to break it. Scholars lost ages trying to read it. One road was battle, one was thought. Neither was meant for humans. Kara crouched beside a wrecked drive, fingers brushing scorch lines. You think too large. That's your flaw. Always waiting for a monumental but sometimes the lock opens with a hairpin. She stripped wires, rerouted circuits, and shaped a booster from crap. Her plan was madness. Instead of solving the sky's equations or blasting through, she meant to trick the maze into believing it was already beaten. The overseers watched in silence, uncertain whether to intervene. Kara's patchwork device hummed, pulsing against the alien grid above. The maze stuttered. Star paths twisted. A breach ripped open in the radiant lattice. Kara rose, dusting her palms. See, the maze just needed a lie bold enough to swallow. Overseers hissed, scandalized. No empire had ever treated deception as victory. For them, honor meant brute force or pure intellect. For Kara, victory meant survival by any means. The breach collapsed suddenly, unleashing guardians born of light, older than Dominion itself. They roared. In chorus, wings of brilliance spanning the horizon. Kara squinted. Finally, something theatrical. I was starting to get restless. She sprinted at them with only her crowbar. Overseers expected her to vanish in fire. Instead she bent the light of their own wings, angling shards of mirrored plating until beams rebounded back at the guardians. They staggered, blinded by their brilliance. She vaulted onto one's back, crowbar jamming into a wing joint until the being burst into sparks. Another dove. Kara rolled through sand, triggering the booster she had wired. Pulsed again, scattering phantoms across the plain. Confused, the guardians chased illusions until one by one they unraveled, not undone by power or wisdom but by a resourcefulness no alien respected. The overseers whispered in unease. This was meant to break humans, the point where their brief lives met their limits, yet Kara crossed those limits as though they were lines in dust. Her triumph forced the overseers to advance the sequence. The fourth trial formed without pause. A full Dominion armada appeared, engines blazing, batteries armed, an impossible foe for a lone pilot. Her shuttle already failing manifested before the swarm. She gave a low whistle. That's a lot of ego packed into metal. She darted forward, not at the warships but toward the drifting graveyards nearby. Her scanners marked fuel cells, derelict drones, discarded parts. She scavenged mid-flight, lashing explosives with cables, dumping them into bay. As the fleet closed, Kara tore through their lines. Plasma scorched past her hull, but she slipped like a splinter through cracks, scattering charges in her wake. Explosions cascaded through their ranks, one warship shattering the next. A cruiser blocked her path. She hooked under its belly, grinding sparks into its vents until the giant erupted. Overseers watched in disbelief. She wasn't supposed to dismantle fleets unaided. Humans weren't supposed to improvise victories against equations of failure. She smiled through the smoke as Dominion vessels collapsed. When the last dreadnought split apart, Kara's shuttle drifted free of fire, battered, spinning, but alive. She wiped her brow, muttering, "You all build fleets like palaces. Beautiful, but one loose nail brings the roof down." Overseers fell to silence. The Dominion's legacy was carved from trials like these. Trials no human was meant to face. Kara hadn't only faced them, she'd toppled them. Yet the cycle couldn't stop. The sequence pressed on until the last measure was drawn. The arena shifted again, the void curdling into the form of a colossal entity, not illusion but memory, summoned from ancient archives. The Titan of Targus, living weapon built to quell revolts, a beast that could consume fleets. Hide glimmered with scales of iron, eyes boiling with storms. The overseer spoke with grim weight. Final prelude. Endure. The Titan. Kara flexed her hands. Finally a boss fight. Took you long enough. The Titan's roar shook stars, and Kara surged forward. Crowbar lifted, ready to prove humanity's sharpest tool wasn't fleets or armies but reckless creativity meeting the impossible with a mail. The Titan of Targus descended like a storm made flesh, each stride sinking the ground into molten pits, its cry thundering across ages. Overseers leaned, intense silence. This was no trial of survival. This was Dominion's reminder of their rule. No species had faced the Titan and endured. Kara clenched her crowbar and laughed, as if mocking the universe itself. "You think size makes Supreme. Let's test that. The Titan unleashed a torrent wide enough to erase fleets. But Kara darted into the wreckage fields, racing across shattered hulls, leaping from shard to shard like a grappler play. The Titan bellowed, sweeping an arm that leveled towers into a. Kara rolled, scrambled, and turned ruin into cover, where alien champions would clash with brute force. Kara hunted for weakness, her eyes locked on the Titan's chest, glowing lines pulsing in rhythm, channels feeding power from its everything's got an off switch, she muttered. She scavenged again, tearing circuits from broken drones, splicing them into her scorched booster. Sparks scorched her gloves, smoke filled her lungs, but she forced the rig alive. The overseers realized too late it wasn't going to outfight the Titan. She'd overload its heart. The Titan howled, unleashing another wave, scorching the arena for miles. Kara slid under the crumbling barrier, racing straight toward the monster. She fired her thruster pack, rigged together from spare fuel cells, and smashed onto the Titan's chest. Heat scorched her suit, metal singed her skin, but she clamped the booster tight and drove her crowbar into the glowing conduit. Energy screamed like a storm. The Titan howled, its frame spasming, claws shredding its own armor as feedback ripped through every circuit. Overseers wailed in fury as their war machine stumbled back, shattering mountains when it crashed. Kara held fast, jaw locked, forcing the booster to keep burning. At last, the Titan collapsed, its body shattering into shards of light that fell like meteors before dissolving into the void. Silence followed, total and crushing. The overseers had no script, no prediction, no story that explained what had just occurred. A human had destroyed their strongest defense. Kara rolled off the wreckage, smoke curling from her ruined armor. She lifted her crowbar like a banner. That all? Because I've got time if you've got more. The overseer chamber trembled, walls flickering as their power cracked. The Dominion had built its reign on invincibility. Now that illusion was broken before every watching star. One overseer stammered, another hissed and vanished into the dark recesses of history. Kara stood on the platform as the simulation ended, reality bleeding back. Beyond her stretched the galaxy, endless stars, each one witness. For ages, humans had been mocked as weak, unworthy, drifters destined to vanish. Now they had a champion who turned barriers into doors. Delegates from distant empires watched through streams and channels, stunned. The Dominion's reign had stood unquestioned for thousands of years, but Kara's triumph lit whispers across the networks. If one human could do this, what might their kind do together? The overseers regrouped, scrambling to salvage pride. Human, they declared, voices strained, you have cleared the final trial. But your species cannot threaten the Dominion. Kara smirked, crowbar resting on her shoulder. Funny. You already look threatened. She walked off without waiting for dismissal. Their shouted orders rang empty. Across the stars, rebellion flickered awake. Every empire took heart at the sight of one human shattering the Dominion's illusion. On Earth, when Kara's broadcast reached the colonies, joy erupted. Children mimicked her crowbar strike with sticks. Soldiers painted her mark on their armor. Engineers printed her face on consoles. Humanity had not only survived the trial, they had turned it into a legend. The Dominion scrambled to launch fleets to smother Earth before the story spread further. But the galaxy had shifted. Species once sworn to obedience refused to march. Armadas splintered, uprisings spread, and systems claimed freedom. The Dominion's grip unraveled faster than any tyrant had imagined. And through the chaos, Kara returned in her battered shuttle, welcomed not as a lone survivor but as a spark of uprising. Human fleets cobbled from junked ships and patched engines gathered under her banner. Aliens who once jeered now sought alliances. Whole worlds rose not just against oppression, but for the promise that no wall was unbreakable. Wars flared across constellations. Dominion citadels crumbled before tactics so unpredictable even overseers faltered. Humans twisted enemy pride into weapons, their fortresses into coffins. Kara became more than commander. She became myth itself, a living reminder that survival was victory and ingenuity was the sharpest blade. At last, after years of fire, the Overseer citadel burned. Their archives, their thrones, their endless trials, reduced to drifting wreckage. The dominion that spanned galaxies ended not with proclamation, but with silence, as if history itself rejected them. Kara stood in the ruins, crowbar strapped at her side. She looked out at stars now free of their watchers and let out a weary laugh. "Told you, I like impossible things." The galaxy listened. From then on, every child under free skies grew up with her tale. The overseers had promised a warning. Instead, humanity had arrived at the final trial, and humanity had not just passed. They had redefined what victory meant.